Hey, friends, how's it going? It is December 1st, which is crazy. That means there's only 30 days left in this year, and that's pretty wild to me. But here we are, December 1st. We're going to be in Proverbs chapter 1 for Wisdom Wednesday, and we are at the beginning of the book, and we're going to read why Solomon wrote Proverbs. And this is always important to remember. We're going to be looking at a couple specific verses. We are going to be looking at verses 3, 7, and 19. Those are going to be the three verses we look at today as we discuss Wisdom Wednesday, the words of Solomon, and living them out today for you and I. So let's read actually verses 2 and 3. Solomon tells us why he wrote the book of Proverbs. He says, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instructions in wise dealings, in righteousness, justice, and equity. Now, these are three things that Solomon points to, that we will have wise understandings in dealing with righteousness, which is defined as knowing good from evil in terms of God's standard. Outside of God's standard, we call that self-righteousness and a self-governing compass of righteousness. Solomon dictates and implicates, and we will see that in verse 7 as we read it, that righteousness as defined by him is to the standard of Jesus. Good versus evil. So understanding and reading the book of Solomon will teach us wisdom in dealing with good versus evil according to God. Secondly, he says that we will understand justice, right versus wrong, in accordance and according to God. And so we will not only know good and evil, we will know right and wrong by studying and applying the scriptures. I would even venture to say that by studying and applying Proverbs to our lives, we will not only know, but we will begin to walk in righteousness, and we will begin to walk in justice. We will know conceptually what is right and wrong and be able to choose right. We will know what is good and evil, and we will be able to do what is good, as we are called to in Ephesians chapter 2. And thirdly, Solomon says that it will be for equity, for fairness to all, that there will be an opportunity that all will experience a fairness. And so we see that this concept of righteousness, of good and evil, of justice, right and wrong, and of equity, fairness versus unfairness, are all dealt with in the words of Solomon. And I don't know about you, but I think in my personal life, probably in your personal lives and in the lives of those around us, we could increase in the concept of righteousness, in the concept of justice, and the concept of equity. Let's move on to verse 7, because I believe that this is key to understanding these things. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so what I see here, friends, is that Solomon is indicating that the basis for this is a reverence, an awe-inspiring view of who God is. Last week, I was talking about mentors and having wise counselors, people who I look up to and I actually revere or hold in high honor their understanding and experience in certain areas of life, be it relationships or financials or pastoring or counseling or whatever that area might be. And Solomon says here that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And so Solomon lays this foundation. He says, look, we need to come to an agreement. We need to understand the foundation of what I base this book off of is having a reverence, looking at God and in a high reverence, highly honoring who God is as the foundation of knowledge. And so, as a believer in Jesus, I believe that God created the heavens and the earth and established principles and purposes for mankind that we might walk in them, which are for the best way for us to live our lives. And if I hold to that position, then I need to revere and I need to hold in high honor the things that God has instructed us in. And by doing so, will be the beginning of learning knowledge. If I was to go into a gym and I didn't trust anyone in it to teach me anything, I would learn nothing. But when you put your trust into someone to teach you something, you have the ability to learn because you're beginning to understand what they're imparting. Solomon says that the reverence of the Lord, the submission to God in understanding, is the beginning of knowledge. However, the fools will despise wisdom and instruction. I don't want that, to govern my life. But when we see it's actually a freedom that Jesus offers us in his knowledge and understanding. And so this is where Solomon is coming from. He desires us to live in wisdom, to walk in righteousness and justice and equity. But he says, do this in the counsel of God, in the reverence of God, in the fear of God. And we want to recognize that this is not a fear of, I'm so afraid. This is a fear of I am so amazed by that I want nothing to do but to do everything God's asked me to. I'm not afraid to mess up. You don't want to be afraid of God in the sense of being fearful, but being aware and revering, holding in high honor his standards in righteousness, justice, and equity. Why? Because it is the beginning of knowledge. And so that's our big takeaway for today. I want to highlight verse 19 just quickly as well, as I feel like this is really important. And this is about priorities. You can read the enticement of sinners, verses 8 through 19, and then the call of wisdom. And if you read Proverbs 1 through 8, you see this banter back and forth between the foolish and the voice of wisdom, calling out to one another and encouraging the young individual that Solomon is writing to either go the way of the fools or go the way of the wise. And this is how Solomon ends his section on the enticement of the fool, the enticement of sinners. He says, such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. And friends, I just want to close today with this. Our priorities in life are important. The little things we do day to day dictate long-term what goes on. And we need to be able to take adequate assessment and stock of the things that we are doing today, because one day it won't be today. It will be 10 years from now, and we'll look back and we'll say, I don't know how I got here. And the reality is it was little steps of priorities that we took. And so if you are an individual in a relationship or you have children, be conscious of the time you spend, those priorities you set. I heard a friend tell me when my daughter was born, he said, you'll only get 52 Saturdays a year with her. Make them count. All right? That weighed heavily upon me. There's a really cool song that just came out by Matthew West, and it's called What If? And he said, I don't want my life to be dictated by what if I reset my priorities. And he said, in one of the lines in the song, he says, I don't want to live my life and find out I'm miles away from what was important. Friends, I encourage you to spend some time in the presence of God, understanding priorities. What are you doing that actually you shouldn't be doing because it's removing your time from your family or removing your time from what God has called you to? I'll end with one last verse, and that's Psalm 33, verse 11. And it said that God's purposes are for every generation are unchanging, and his plan of salvation is unwavering. And so, friend, I just want to encourage you today that God has a purpose and a plan. He has the way of life, the way of righteousness, justice, and equity, and he teaches us that through his word. The beginning of it is to understand and acknowledge that God is God and we are not, and then to begin to study and apply what the word says. So that's it for our time on Wisdom Wednesday. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm excited for the next few weeks of going through Proverbs 8:15 and whatever comes after that, 22, I guess. And we will see you next Wednesday. Bye.